Welcome to this week's edition of Good Books Radio. I'm your host, Dr. W.F. Strong. Have an exciting book for you today, The Ascendant by Drew Chapman. And I'm really excited to have Drew Chapman on because he is a television writer. He's written a lot for CSI types of shows and thrillers. And so if you like shows like 24 and if you like those types of thrillers, Homeland, you'll love his work. And he has a new novel out called The Ascendant, and it is a rollicking read. It's interesting because it's kind of a new take on the James Bond character who's now gone digital, you might say. So we're going to talk to him about this world that he's created that's very much in tune with the scary dimensions of the digital universe that we live in now. Drew, how are you today?
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I tell you, I read your book, and I was pulled in right away. I mean, I always kind of test books as to whether they will keep me awake. Will I care enough to keep reading them into the night? And yours pulled me in right away. Part of it being that, I love Homeland, I love 24 Hours, and I love a intellectual thriller. And your guy here, Reilly, is, a Jason Bourne for the digital age. So let's talk about the scenario that the book is built around, and it's something that's, quite possible in this age, and that's the warfare, cyber warfare.
Yeah, so the book is about, as you said, Garrett Reilly, right? And he's a 26-year-old bond trader. Mm-hmm. He works on Wall Street, and his specialty, the way that he makes money, is pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the book, he discovers that someone is selling off massive amounts of U.S. Treasuries to attack the American economy. Mm-hmm. And then he discovers that it's the Chinese. And what he realizes is that there's this invisible war going on between the U.S. and China. And that war is psychological, it's economic, and it's cyber. Mm-hmm. And the military comes to try to recruit Garrett to help fight that war. And this is sort of where, things go slightly off track because Garrett has a subversive streak like a mile wide. And yes, you can ask him to do whatever you want, and there's no guarantee he's going to be on your side, right? And so that's sort of both of the modern quality of it and also the fun of the book, right? He's not James Bond. He's, it's hard to, he's half James Bond, half Edward Snowden.
Yes. Well, I was thinking as I was reading the book about how unlikely it would have been for something like the Big Bang Theory to have been a major hit 20 years ago, the kind of the Revenge of the Nerds thing. And he is like that, a brilliant mind who has pattern recognition. He understands the esoteric world of bond trading. And so ordinarily 20 years ago, you wouldn't have put a guy like that in a book like this to be, this kind of hero. But in this age, you need that sort of brilliance. Otherwise, James Bond's left in the dust.
Well, yeah, and, so part of the sort of inspiration for this was I really love those big thrillers that you were sort of talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love the book version, right? I ripped through all those Tom Clancy books, mm-hmm. and I still read those Lee Child, Jack Reacher novels. Mm-hmm. But there's a way in which those heroes, I felt, even though I love them, they kind of needed a little bit of a polish to bring them up to the modern age. I mean, I've never met anyone who can kill you with his pinky, right? But I have met lots of people who can absolutely suck your bank account dry, and you never know it. And so I wanted to sort of introduce that level of complexity and intelligence into a modern thriller hero. I thought that was really, really important to me. So to make it both action and cerebral at the same time. I mean, that was my goal, whether, No,
I think you absolutely nailed it. And the thing that you've also done well is that just like Clancy had an authentic understanding of military technology, you convey an authentic understanding of trading and how that could bring down countries.
Well, I did a huge amount of research for this book. I mean, I sat on a bond trading desk for days just listening to these guys talk and watching how they do business. I mean, they have their own weird, complicated language, right, in the financial business. I spoke to IT guys and computer programmers. I went and sat down with cybersecurity people. I mean, just I love research. To me, research is even more fun than writing. It's just talking to people about what they do. It's so fascinating, and people love to explain their jobs. So that I just, I wanted to make the plot of this book as plausible as possible. I wanted you to read it and go, oh my God, this
could happen.
This is happening.
Yes. In fact, one thing that you say in the book, I want to read this little part here that I thought set things up nicely as to what we're up against, is when General Wilkerson is explaining why this is such a big problem, this cyber warfare, and he says that the most dangerous attack, the one a general fears the most, is the one he doesn't understand, the one he never saw coming because it was deemed outside the realm of possibility. The attack that catches you completely by surprise, Hannibal's elephants crossing the Alps, the Nazi blitzkrieg, 2 planes crashing into the World Trade Center, those moments change the course of history, and they can destroy entire nations. I mean, that's kind of the thesis, isn't it?
That is absolutely the idea. I mean, it's certainly one of those ideas. So I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by the idea of groupthink, right? I'm fascinated by the idea that when you sort of join an organization, or you're part of a family, or you're a nation, whatever it is, you start to think like everybody else in your group. It's part of human nature. It's what, makes us, it's what allows us to build civilizations, right? It's what binds us in society. But at the same time, it blinds us to things that are outside of our basic nature. And I'm fascinated by that. I'm always interested in how, when you're sitting in a room full of Democrats, you really buy into what the Democrats are telling you. And when you're sitting into a room full of Republicans and you sit there, you'll buy into what they're telling you, unless you're so firmly entrenched in the opposite. And I love those social science experiments where they put people on a team and tell them that this is what they're supposed to do, and then you become loyal to that team, even if you know nothing about the other people in your team. And so I find that just utterly fascinating, and I wanted to write about it because I think the military suffers from that right now in a big, big way. And they are trying really hard to, undo that sort of groupthink, because they know that it can be an Achilles heel.
Well, let's talk for a moment about the contextual reality of this book. China has how many U.S. dollars?
Well, they are sitting on about $1.3 trillion in our debt.
And so that sets up a scenario where if they wanted to dump those dollars, they could hurt us.
They could,
but they hurt themselves too.
That's exactly right. So, what's so interesting about our relationship to China is, here's this country that we are huge trading partners with. They hold a massive amount of our debt, and they hold a massive amount separately from debt in dollars, just in sort of cash. And yet, they're not really our ally. We're not exactly friendly with them on all fronts. They're certainly not Canada or Germany or France, right?
Yes, true.
And so here's this weird sort of back and forth. They're flexing their political and military muscle, and we don't like it. And they're not crazy about the way we're behaving either. And yet, we're so intimately tied up with them economically.
And are they behind a lot of these probing sort of cyber attacks that we experience almost daily? Well,
it's hard to know. In my research, they're certainly behind a percentage of them, a large percentage. Like, for instance, I sat down with this guy who was the head of cybersecurity for a large North American power company. I was doing research. And he said, your timing's great, because just last week they had experienced the largest cyber attack on the North American electric grid in their history. They said, well, no, we didn't want to publicize it because we didn't want copycat attacks, and we didn't want to freak out the American public. And so I was like, oh my God, this is the invisible war happening, right in front of us. But who was behind it. And so I asked, and he wasn't entirely sure. They felt it was China, but they couldn't be absolutely positive. And when I went back a month later, they still didn't know.
So a lot of the problem is we just don't know where these are coming from, and we've done them ourselves, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. I think the NSA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the CIA, the Pentagon, they're all working on this 24/7, and they are out there probing, attacking all kinds of networks in other countries, foreign corporations. There's no doubt about it. It's absolutely.
Well, the most successful one, I suppose, from our side that we know of and is kind of public knowledge is the attack on Iran's nuclear facilities using a worm.
Yeah, the Stuxnet worm was a bit of computer code that was either written by the Americans or the Israelis. Nobody quite knows, that they introduced into Iranian uranium enrichment centrifuges. And that worm got into all their computers and started running all their centrifuges at massive speed, and told all the operators that they were running at a normal speed, and they ran them so fast that they destroyed them. They just ruined them, because centrifuges are super, super sensitive. And the fascinating thing was, well, a couple of fascinating things. One is that you could look at that as an act of war. I mean, you go in and destroy somebody's nuclear reactors. That's declaring war in a way. The other thing that was fascinating to me was how they did it, how they introduced those bits of computer program into the Iranian computers. So nobody knows for sure, but they think that they left thumb drives with the infection, the worm on those thumb drives, and they left them in places where Iranian nuclear scientists would find them.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that part of it.
Curiosity, those scientists stuck those thumb drives into their computers and then transferred the worms into the and so it was basically human curiosity.
Well, you've got to admire the brilliance of it.
Oh my God,
it's a brilliant plan.
Totally. Well, it's both brilliant and so just basic. It's like when you click on the Anna Kournikova pictures, see Anna Kournikova nude here. You click and then you just lost $50,000.
I've never done that. So.
No, none of us ever have. Never.
But has this research changed your own habits?
Well, my wife is like, okay, we have to move all of our money out of our online bank account. People are going to start attacking you. You know what? The best thing you can do is get really strong passwords, like passwords that are so complicated you just have to write them down to remember them, and that they're different for every site. So I do some, but the truth is I talk a good game of golf, and then I'm not really playing as well as I should. So I don't do it as I rely on the hoped for safety of my bank, for instance, that they know what they're doing more than I do.
Well, it is difficult to come up with different passwords for everything, and then you can't remember them, and you've protected them against yourself often. You get so good at it.
And you're at the airport and you desperately need something, and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea what my passport is. I'm so screwed.
So now we've laid out the scenario, the very real scenario that China holds a lot of U.S. dollars, and in your book you've kind of obviously hyped this particular relationship to a new level to create the scenario that makes it all the more frightening. What else in the layers of problem? What else is here besides the enormous amount of dollars that China holds?
Well, in the problem between the two nations, or just the problem of the book?
Within the book. I'm just trying to get you to reveal a little bit without revealing everything.
Okay. Well, so part of the problem is very much a character issue, right? So I talked about Garrett Reilly and how he has this subversive streak. I really wanted to create a modern thriller hero, somebody who represented a new generation of Americans, like people in their 20s who I think have been promised the the American dream, the idea of upward mobility and that you can trust your government, and that who found in the last 4, 5, 6 years that that's not necessarily true, right? That you aren't guaranteed to make more money than your parents, and your government's every once in a while going to lie to you. And like Edward Snowden, Garrett Reilly, the main character, he has this big subversive streak, and he and people like Snowden are asking these really tough questions, sort of, who is the system set up for? Is it set up for me, or is it set up for somebody who's far wealthier than me? Mm-hmm. And what does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be loyal to your government? Mm-hmm. And I think what fascinates me, and what a lot of people who've read the book come back to me with, is they are fascinated by Garrett's course. Mm-hmm. Will he or won't he be a hero? Will he or won't he be a traitor? And the United States is split on people like Edward Snowden. I mean, the New York Times just said that they want him to be pardoned and mm-hmm. have clemency. And then if you read the letters to the editor, they were enraged. How can you do this? He's a traitor. And I'm not going to take sides on that particular mm-hmm. issue, but I find the discussion fascinating because I'm always interested in what the country thinks and where we're headed. And I love books that take those big themes and embody them in specific characters.
No, I think that Snowden, the more we find out about the NSA's snooping on its own citizens, the more Snowden becomes a hero for revealing it.
There's absolutely that take, and I think that what he did is, in a way, heroic, and he is a whistleblower. At the same time, he did break the law and reveal classified documents. So it's a really complicated question.
No, I agree. It is a complicated question, but the NSA was doing things it should not be doing and has no authority to do, in my opinion. But that's why I like your book, because it takes on, these issues that are the big questions of our time.
Well, and I actually agree with you, but I've been working on this television show called The Assets, which is about the battle between the KGB and the CIA during the Cold War of the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And it was written as a book by this woman, Sandy Grimes, and she was a CIA case officer. And she and I, we sat down and we did lots of interviews and research, and we started talking about Edward Snowden. And, oh my God, did I get an earful from her. Because from her point of view, and she is a hardcore patriot, mm-hmm. from her point of view, people don't understand. They don't get the ferocity and they don't get that we have enemies out there, and those enemies want to do us harm, and they want to do us harm in a big way. And from her point of view, there should be secrets. Now, she worked for the CIA, so that was her business. But, and those secrets should be kept. And if you declassify them, if you dump classified material, you are committing a terrible crime, and there's no pardon for that.
Well, Drew, you can't handle the truth.
Exactly.
We need men on those walls. But I'm like you. I can intellectually, of course, see that point of view, but in a free society, you go back to Churchill's famous saying that, it's Franklin, I think, who said that if you give up liberty for security, you achieve neither. And that's always kind of my take, is that we're a free society and we shouldn't be snooped on by our own government.
You know what? I am with you. I am with you, and I think ultimately Snowden will be viewed in a heroic light over the long term, because I think that we're just beginning to understand the breadth of what the NSA has been doing, and not just the NSA. I think that there's, the thing that frightens me even more than what the NSA does is there is a massive contractor business out there that is about that is a national security business. And it's not just the Pentagon, it's not just the CIA, it's companies that they hire who basically watch over us in all ways, shapes, and forms. They monitor internet traffic, phones, they put up closed circuit television, they're watching. And they're watching for what I consider a good reason, which is to keep us safe, but it is intrusive. And part of me, the economist in me, also thinks it's an amazing waste of money. That almost bothers me more. I'm like, oh my God, you're spending my tax dollars on stuff that is so not necessary. But it's a self-perpetuating thing, right? It's the whole Eisenhower military-industrial complex, which is real.
Oh, yes. And well, the flip side of this is that there's a lot of this information that is, of course, gathered by corporate America quite legally, and more so than we can ever realize, I think. And in the future, not only will government, but corporations, by our own doing, will know everywhere that we are and everything that we're looking at wherever we are. Kind of like you said, you hover your mouse over something on the net, and people gather information from you.
And I am of such two minds about that, because on the one hand, I actually like that, streaming sites and Amazon and all these different people will make recommendations for me. It doesn't bother me. I'm thinking, I don't really have like horrible secrets that I'm afraid that you'll know. And if I do have a horrible secret, I'm not so proud that, I care if you find out about it. But at the same time, then if I really think about it, I think, well, but someday I may have a secret that I don't have. And, I want to have the option of keeping that to myself. So I literally have that debate in my head sometimes.
I think we all do now. What is too much. Now, I'm like you. I don't mind, at least the part of it that's the corporate part I don't mind, because I have voluntarily put myself in that situation. And it's a good thing for you as writer, because if I go searching for Jason Bourne, it may refer me to your book as well. It may say, you might also like The Ascendant.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So it can help me
benefit from it.
It can help me find things I might not otherwise know about that I will love. So there's very good things. I just when we're back on the Snowden thing, that's without my permission.
Right. Well, and I think there's a difference between corporations and government.
Yes.
A corporation cannot arrest me and put me in jail. A corporation cannot try me and, execute me. The government can, and there have to be limits on that.
Well, I was kind of like, as a person who's done a lot of stock trading in my life, I wasn't in this book very far where I was saying, short the market, short it. I was just like your hero here. I said, I don't want to get involved with the government because I could make a lot of money knowing what I know. And now he has to sell out his capitalist side, to help the government win. And I love that you have him keep coming back to that. He said, man, I could be making a fortune
right.
if I weren't working for the government now.
Right. To leave money on the table just infuriates him. Well, it's interesting. So one of the things for me was one of the birthplaces of this book was I was under contract to a television network, and they needed content from me. They needed ideas, big for television shows, and I had the idea for The Ascendant, and I thought, I could pitch this to them, and then I thought, they're gonna think it's too edgy, it's too political, and that the lead character isn't sympathetic enough. And so I said, forget it, I'm going to write it as a book, because what I really wanted was for Garrett Reilly to be, in polite form, a jerk. I wanted him to be obnoxious. I wanted to just infuriate everybody. But because he was always moving forward, because he's smart, because he wants something, and because he's troubled, you would find that engaging. And I would say that my biggest criticism of both movies and television is when they come up with characters who are too sympathetic for their own good. I think Americans are ready to read about and see on television and see in movies characters who are really, really flawed. Tony Soprano, right? Mad Men or House or all these shows where the lead is at best flawed, at worst really horrible human being, but the drama of that horrible human being is incredibly compelling. And that's what I wanted to do. I don't want to make Garrett horrible. I did try to redeem him, and I think the story is about his personal, moral, emotional growth. But I wanted to make him troublesome. And a lot of the reviews of like online reviews at Goodreads and stuff they're like, God, at first I really hated Garrett. I just couldn't stop reading about him. And I thought, okay, that's it. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, he's kind of in that genre, you might say, of the Homeland guy. I can't remember his name, but he's a horrible guy on the one hand, and the more you find out about him, the more you think, well, maybe there's something redeeming in him, and it's a good, flawed Shakespearean sort of character.
Exactly. I think the Shakespearean, not that I could ever be that,
yeah, I understand.
But just that idea that, that a character is so flawed and yet so compelling. I love that. And the other thing is I love characters that are sort of everyday people put into these extraordinary situations. And that's the other thing I really wanted to get across with Garrett, that he's this, 26-year-old, junior bond trader, right? And then all of a sudden he's asked to protect the country, and that's always fun. That's a fun story to tell.
Well, for anybody who enjoys good stock market stories and likes following what can happen with world markets, and we have, lots of movies in the past couple of years that have dealt with that. The most recent one, of course, is The Wolf of Wall Street. And which, as I was thinking about that with your book, I thought, this book makes the original Wall Street seem like it was, BC. It's it's just so old, and that's what I like about it. It's cutting edge. It's current. It's about the fast-paced nature of contemporary markets and how they could be manipulated to sink whole economies. So you built a realistic book and put it into a context that is quite absorbing.
Well, thank you. And I am obsessed with economics. I'm obsessed with the flow of money. I'm so interested in how money shapes our decisions on a personal level, and it shapes our decisions on a sort of nationwide level. People always are talking about how the New York Times is the paper of record in the country, and I think it is. But I always say, yeah, but if you really want to understand the inner workings of America, read the Wall Street Journal. Read about how money moves around the country, because that tells you stuff that you wouldn't ever get in other papers. So I think that Americans are just now waking up to the immense power of the financial markets, brokerage houses, banks, and the things that they do that we don't know about. And sometimes it takes a massive disruption to the system, like the 2008 financial crisis, to make those things really, visible to us, right? So that we all of a sudden understand that they have been collecting our mortgages, selling them off, and then basically speculating with them. And that it bankrupted some of them, or that there are derivatives or collateralized debt obligations, all these things that we didn't know anything about. And then all of a sudden we're like, holy mackerel, this could take us all down.
And they're the only segment of society that would have been bailed out that way. Because if we allowed them to go down, the whole country would have gone down.
Well, and so I was at a reading, and this woman was asking me, she kept saying, do you think that the banks and the brokerage houses got a free ride because of the bailout? And is that right? And I said, you know what? It's not morally right, and they did get a free ride. But if they hadn't, we'd all be living in tents.
Yes.
So, it's like, what? How do you justify it? Does the ends justify the means? I don't know.
Okay, I've got to wrap up. It's been a wonderful conversation. The book is The Ascendant by Drew Chapman, out now. Get it at your bookstore, get it on the Kindle. It's a wonderful read, and you can listen to this interview again on Good Books Radio, on the internet, or on the YouTube channel, Good Books Radio, Facebook, Good Books Radio also.